what are the top budget Yu-Gi-Oh decks right now? Big dog, I've created a tier list with some of the most popular and requested Yu-Gi-Oh strategies. Yes, even ones that you mentioned in the last tier list, and I'm gonna be ranking them from top budget to ice for dinner. Hey, big dog, in them trying times, I ain't gonna lie. Ice is bussin'. It's better than air pudding. I'm still hungry though. Let's go ahead and jump on in. What's going on with y'all, big dog? And it is an amazing day for Yu-Gi-Oh! Hope that your day phenomenal. But if it isn't, don't let what happened at the beginning of your day ruin the rest of your day. My brokies, I remember those trying times. So don't try me when it comes to the criteria of this tier list. It's gonna be different from last week, so if you see a strategy that may be ranked different on this tier list, keep in mind, completely different criteria. This particular Yu-Gi-Oh tier list does take into account the strength of these Yu-Gi-Oh decks, but a little bit more importantly, it also takes into account how powerful are these decks initially when you get them on a budget, and if you can invest more money, will the strategy be stronger? That has been the core components of this budget tier list and has separated itself from the other tier lists. So let's go ahead and start off with Plunder Patrol. Plunder Patrol seems to have most of its ships together. We still may be searching for that one piece, which just might be the Wind ship, but the best thing about Plunder Patrol is since that it's a Fiend deck and we're getting more Fiend support like Fiendsmith, you could potentially play that inside of the strategy and make it stronger. Don't forget the other variants, such as the Adventure Engine, Kaijus, and Labyrinth. Plunder Patrol could be a really good deck, right? I'm gonna go ahead and say ice for dinner still. It's not that I don't think Fiendsmith will help Plunder Patrol. The thing is, we're in June. Infinite Forbidden doesn't come out until late July. And if those cards happen to be expensive, I wouldn't say it's a good investment to pick up Plunder Patrol because those cards will make it stronger. It'll make other Fiend decks that are a little bit easier to access better too. Looks like Thar's ship has sailed on that one, but let's move on to Flunderese. Flunderese may have sailed across the 7 seas, but I think there's something you need to be alarmed about with this deck. Flunderese tops have been dwindling and dwindling. Now, a big argument could be it's because players found a new deck that they could just turn their brains off in Tenpai Dragon, or you could say that Flunderese just isn't strong enough. As much as I would like to believe the second one, I still think that this is a solid choice budget Yu-Gi-Oh deck. It still has access to one of the most busted cards in Yu-Gi-Oh's history in Harpy's Featherstorm, and for some reason, this card still isn't banned, so I would say use it until it isn't usable. Flunderese is the ultimate budget Yu-Gi-Oh player's deck, but like I always forewarn you, expect not to have a lot of friends by being the Flunderese player. Hell, the Snake Eyes players might be your friends, but I'm not sure if that's good company all the time. Dino Morphia. Look guys, let's not pretend. Dino Morphia does very similar things to Flunderese. The only difference is people actually like Dino Morphia players. I don't know, maybe it's because they're not eating as much glue? Nah, I'm lying. But Dino Morphia is a cheap, effective Yu-Gi-Oh deck. I would say that it's top budget, not because I think Dino Morphia can win huge major events, but simply because the cost effectiveness for Dino Morphia is just way too good to ignore. I mean, guys, you might moorball $40 and get an entire Dino Morphia deck. Main, extra, side, it's that cheap. And who can genuinely resist the face of Dino Morphia Kentragina? I know I can. Dino Morphia does have a similar way to turn off your opponent's effects with Dino Morphia Rexstrom, and boasts a ton of great trap cards like the Solemn Series and Flared Flames to be able to keep some of the top decks in check if you play it correctly. Now, Sword Soul got second place at one of the biggest regionals in America. For comparison, an LA regional is usually double the size of a South American YCS. I'm sorry, South America, I just had to say it. You gotta give Sword Soul some credit. The deck does not give up. Though I don't think that Sword Soul's success is indicative of a comeback, I do think it's a pretty decent borderline Yu-Gi-Oh deck. It's a strategy that can perform when it performs, but just keep in mind, this deck has not received any support in 4 years, while Branded is getting more cards. Konami, do something about that. Trap Tricks. Ah, yes, the other trap deck. I find it incredibly hard to tell you to play a deck like Trap Tricks over Dino Morphia or even Labyrinth, because those strategies are just better at going second too. Now, Trap Tricks did just hop inside of the Houston Regional, but I'm more inclined to think that it's the pilot that made Trap Tricks incredibly good rather than the deck. I wouldn't say that Trap Tricks is necessarily a bad Yu-Gi-Oh deck until you have to go second against some of the other strategies in the game. It becomes incredibly hard, and you need a player that's nuanced with the strategy to be able to succeed. Magispectors. Why are we even talking about this deck, dog? For a deck full of spellcasters, one thing that I would wish is that I got more ice for dinner instead of this deck. Magispector Ortho Nu is just way too easy to counter, and once it does get countered in this game, you're pretty much cooked as a Magispector player. I mean, the best thing about Pendulums is that they're monsters that also have spell effects. And Magispectors really missed the mark right there. Magispectors is an engine inside of Draco Slayer or maybe some type of Pendulum deck. Pretty good. By itself, we'll move on. Melodious is somehow a budget Yu-Gi-Oh deck, and it's one of the best budget Yu-Gi-Oh decks that you can buy. In terms of budget to success, this deck has topped a massive amount of events all across the format. It's one of Konami's most successful strategies that were literally nothing before it got support. If you're thinking about investing into this deck, it's a good idea. Now, Sharks will be a lot better in Rage of the Abyss, but a card that I really think you need to be looking out for is that Shark Xseed monster in Age of Overlord. Yes, there is potential for Full Armor Dark Knight Lancer to be reprinted, but if it doesn't, oh my god, that card's crazy good. But pre-Rage of the Abyss, which by the way is about 5 months from now, I don't think Sharks have what it takes unless you're a player that is incredibly skilled with the deck. I'm gonna put it in takes a really good pilot. I love that fishing out the cards required for this deck is incredibly cheap, but I don't like that you can't sink your teeth into anything competitively viable until at least 5 months from now when Rage of the Abyss comes out. Red Dragon Archfiend. Holy! I think Red Dragon Archfiend is strong. I talked about it in the Rogue tier list. This deck actually did top a Nationals and it did not use the Bystials. It was pretty much 3 Red Dragon Archfiend structure decks and hand traps, and we already know all hand traps are cheap now. And Red Dragon Archfiend now gets the new monster that we've been leading, the Crimson Lotus. Holy crap, guys. Chat, look, I know you can send Red Rain with the card from deck to the graveyard, but you can also send the Black Goat Laughs. Think about that. I genuinely want to put Red Dragon Archfiend into top budget. I think the only thing that's holding it back would be solid choice, and that's Bystial Dispatter. Now, don't get me wrong, Bystial Dispatter is getting reprinted soon, so you're very much on your way. I think picking up 3 of the structure decks of this particular deck was probably one of the best structure decks that we've had in quite some time. Blackwings, Crow's deck. I think that Blackwings are really good. They have a ton of synchro potential and a bigger ceiling than Red Dragon Archfiend, but at the cost of consistency issues. Also, unlike Red Dragon Archfiend, most successful Blackwing decks do use the Bystial monsters, which does raise the price up. I think Blackwings is a takes a good pilot deck. Overall, a very solid deck where you have to learn nuanced combos to be able to progress in harder places of the game. Exo Sisters. I think when a lot of players play against this deck, they necessarily don't want none. The deck's straight church when you go against a graveyard deck, or if you can resolve a dimension shifter against some of the top strategies. I think one of the best things about Exo Sister is that the entire deck is really cheap with the rarity collection too, but I don't think that it's a strategy above borderline. You don't get as much bang for your buck with Exo Sisters as you would with Dino Morphia. The deck has some flaws. Most of the Exo Sisters are not good. The deck is ultra reliant on its Exo Sister Xseeds, and anytime players are playing Nibiru, you gotta watch your back. Marineess though. This was a strategy you guys hounded me for on my last tier list, so you better pay attention. Marineess is the best water deck. 1-card combos, really solid and room to build. You can also assume when Rage of the Abyss drops, this deck will get stronger too by the generic water support. I think that overall it's just a solid choice. It's a deck that just flat out won't disappoint you in the long run. Now we have Heroes. People may come at me sideways, but I still think that Heroes are one of the best budget decks in the game. It's gonna sound a little weird, but I think Heroes are very underexplored in the competitive circuit and can make success if people stop looking at it as an anime deck and start looking at it as a real deck that can contend. But who knows, I could be coping. Let me know down below in the comment section if this ain't it and Heroes aren't one of the better decks. Funnily enough, I spent an entire stream learning and playing Volmanica in Master Duel. And in Master Duel, they currently have all of the cards that we have in the TCG. Volmanica is a big Baguska pass type Yu-Gi-Oh deck that really struggles with going second. Shout out to my boy Sean for popularizing Volmanica Exo Sisters. I'm gonna put it in takes a good pilot. I don't think Volmanica does anything necessarily terrible right now, but it also doesn't do anything really good. It's reliant on counters, it's reliant on pendulum scales, it's reliant on Volmonica spell cards to give you and take damage at time, and one of them is just completely bad. If you're jumping in from Master Duel into the TCG and want to play Volmonica, pick up the deck if you want to have fun, but don't pick up the deck if you want to win, at least now. Infinite Forbidden may change that, but I don't think anything is going to change for Raid Raptors. It's a deck that is going to be borderline. The good thing about Raid Raptors is that if you can summon Raid Raptor Ultimate Rising Rebellion Falcon, the rank 13 monster is invincible. You win. The bad thing about that is summoning the card. Yeah, good luck doing that in a format where everybody's playing 15 hand traps. It's annoying. I think Memento is also better than what people gives it credit. I'm going to put it in really good pilot too. These two decks were pretty fun to play. I love that Memento can summon Guardian Chimera, but as of right now, both of these decks don't do enough just yet. I think that changes in Infinite Forbidden, and we'll visit it back when that comes out. And you could almost say the same thing about Shining Sarcophagus too. I'm going to put it takes a good pilot. All three of these decks have potential that players are not looking into. Solid Yu-Gi-Oh strategies that's just one set away from becoming really good. Purrely may not have done the thing on a competitive circuit that players may want to, but as a good budget Yu-Gi-Oh deck, it's still one of the best decks in the game. Purrely is just one good player away from winning a YCS. That's how powerful it is. But as simple as the deck looks, when you start to play the game, you realize that it's incredibly nuanced. The deck reminds me on Vanquish Soul in its approach, and if you pick it up as a budget deck, I don't think you'll regret it. You just need to spend a lot of work learning and mastering it. Now, Sprite is finally a budget Yu-Gi-Oh deck. Keep in mind that anytime new level 2 monsters come out, this is the heads up 7-up deck that you may want to look into. And also, I'd be on coke to tell you that this is not a solid choice. There's actually so many viable ways to play Sprite. Adventure Sprite, Tri-Brigade Sprite just topped the Nationals. Pure, Live Twins. I think the malleability of this deck is what gives it that solid choice. I don't think that it's bad, but in terms of budget and playability, it's pretty decent. After thorough testing with Genex, my opinion has changed for the worse. I'd rather have ice. I've told people that the worst thing about this deck is that any one hand trap pretty much kills it. Then I read a comment where someone said they play 9 ways to stop it. So now you need to open the combo and the card to stop me. Great. You added more bricks to your deck. Maybe it's just me, but I don't believe in Genex. Infernoid as a pure deck because you know way too broke to be affording Snake Eyes. Bro, that's the whole check and then some. I think that Infernoid is still solid. The best thing about Infernoid is that it is still consisting of a deck of all DD Crows. That can be incredibly good. The worst thing about the pure build is that technically you sacrificed a lot of consistency. And you also sacrificed a lot of power because, you know, Snake Eyes cards are kind of busted. Now, if you asked a friend to get those Trident Dragons, then Tenpai Dragon is the best deck on this tier list to be able to start the game on a budget with. I want to point out that none of these are in order, but Tenpai Dragon is the head honcho. Without Trident Dragon, this deck maybe costs $60, and it's probably because of Cash Tier Affinity. It's also the second strongest deck in Yu-Gi-Oh right now too. Pure Fire King, I don't want to do this to my boys. Yeah. I think one of the biggest problems with Pure Fire King is that the deck just simply isn't good enough. A lot of decks are making ridiculous turn 1 boards where you kind of just summon Grunix, destroy, and pass. I wouldn't even tell you that it's worth it because you'll get Snake Eyes, because Snake Eyes Fire King is statistically the worst version of Snake Eyes out of all the competitive ones. So Fire Kings is in a really odd spot, at least until we get Yolcanics, and maybe we can look at some other things. Ritual Beast is a solid choice. I actually have a video showcasing how powerful Ritual Beasts are, so go ahead and check that out. I love that this is probably the best Dimension Shifter deck out of this entire tier list because it does gain from activating Shifter. You guys wanted me to talk about Rocket Dragon Link? Sometimes you just gotta murder your babies, and with Chaos Space at 1, Magnum Mud at 1, I think it's a card or a deck that takes a good pilot. To be honest with you, there's almost no reason you should be playing Dragon Link over Red Dragon Archfiend or Tenpai Dragon right now, but if you were genuinely set in your old ways, you could make it run, and if you're really good at the game, you actually could get a lot of accomplishments done with it. There's been some Dragon Link decks that have topped on some pretty big events. On the last tier list, you guys asked me where would I put DDD. I love DDD. Ice for dinner. Even when DDD got its support back in Battle with Chaos, the deck was outclassed, and now we are way past that. As far as budget, really good. As far as competitiveness, That ice sound real good. You guys also asked what are Charmers as a deck. Ice for dinner. There is a Salamangreat Charmer FTK though, but that's Salamangreat and Snake Eyes, which is nowhere near budget. Lastly is going to be Ice Barriers. Ice Barriers is a borderline Yu-Gi-Oh deck. I think the biggest problem with Ice Barriers is getting hand trapped, but a lot of players are switching to Ice Barrier Runic to be able to play around hand traps and still gain advantage. And that's all that I have for the top budget Yu-Gi-Oh decks, big dog. I want you to let me know, what do you think about this tier list? As always, I hope you're having an amazing day. Be sure to check out these videos so I can catch you on the next one.